Hey everyone, welcome to the Hey Hannah podcast. I'm your host, Dr. Mya Fields, but to my friends and those who know me well, I'm just Mya. I'm a higher education administrator, a mother, and a wife of 14 amazing years. But above all, I'm a Christ follower. This podcast is a special platform created to honor the memory of my beloved daughter, Hannah. It's here that I have the chance to have the conversations that I never got to have with her, to share the wisdom and love I wish I could have passed on. It's a reminder to cherish the precious moments we're given and a testament to the power of healing, hope, and personal growth. If you're someone who's seeking personal growth, inspiration, and practical advice to build a solid foundation for a successful and fulfilling life, this is the place for you. Join me as we honor Hannah's memory together. Laugh, cry, and learn. Get ready for a podcast that is so much more than you could ever imagine. The Hey Hannah podcast, healing hearts, one conversation at a time. Hey everyone, welcome back to another episode of the Hey Hannah podcast. So glad that you are continuing to join in every week and hopefully learn some cool stuff along the way. Today we have Katie Harvey with us. She is the non-diet dietitian. So we're excited to talk about her and her approach to positive body image and all that she does. She's also a fellow podcaster. So the cool thing is we get to hear from her today, but you can carry on the conversation with her over on her platform for her podcast. And she's going to tell us a little bit more about that today also. So, Katie, thank you so much for being here. So excited to have you.
Oh my gosh, it's such a joy to be here. I'm really excited to have this conversation.
Wonderful. So tell me a little bit about, first of all, the name. When you hear non-diet dietitian, it kind of catches you off guard. So tell me a little bit about how you have formed your vision for how you operate as a dietitian and a little bit about the work that you do.
Absolutely. So, when most people think of dietitian, they think of putting someone on a diet and helping them lose weight. It is, really the reaction I mostly get from people.
Yeah.
And so I found that I had to start kind of qualifying that of I don't put people on diets. I actually am very anti-diet in my philosophy because the research on dieting is really clear that it doesn't work. And what
Yeah.
I mean by that is that most people will initially lose some weight on a diet. So it looks like it works in the beginning, but within 2 to 5 years, 95% of the time they have regained that weight. And usually it's plus some. So the end result of going on a diet is usually weight gain, not weight loss.
Oh,
And knowing that, I just can't ethically do that to somebody. And so
yeah.
I look at, how do we help someone relate to food and to their body in a way that supports their health and well-being, that's not about dieting and restricting and depriving and fixating on weight loss as your only metric of health or self-worth?
Yeah. Oh, wow. Okay. That completely makes sense. 95%, that is huge. I didn't realize that as far as
Yeah.
statistics with dieting. I am curious, how much harder is your job when we have so many diet medications? I mean, we unless you've been under a rock, you've heard about Ozempic. I probably just butchered the name and all of these types of things. How does that factor into the work that you do and when you're trying to create, you know, a positive mindset around your body image and kind of steer away from the quick fixes, so to speak?
Yeah. Oh my gosh. That's been wild this past, I don't know what year or so since those medications have been all the rage. And I really, I do take a look at these things from an evidence-based and a science-based standpoint to look at, okay, if we're talking about a medication, what does it do? How does it work? What's it doing inside the body? And what's interesting with this new class of drugs is they have some really powerful health benefits, especially for people who have blood sugar issues or insulin
Yeah.
resistance or diabetes or heart disease and stuff like that. And so there are definitely people that that's a wonderful medication for. And then there are people who are misusing it just as a quick
Yeah.
fix for weight loss. And that's not super helpful. And so I'm very, in general, like pro healthcare, pro medicine, pro, things for our health. And the tricky part of my job is how do we unblend that from diet culture to look at what's actually
Yeah.
helpful and what's not? And so much of it's going to be individual because we're all unique humans with unique bodies and relationships to food and access to healthcare and all sorts of things.
Yeah, for sure. I'm just thinking about, and obviously this is not my space, but there's a ton of research in the higher ed space about just like goal setting and getting those quick wins up front, kind of serving as the catalyst for your momentum picking up going forward. And I bring that back around to say sometimes I wonder if, like, when you do have medication that's involved and you're able to get that quick win, do you see that people who are encouraged by the win up front tend to progress or stick with, a healthy eating lifestyle going forward because they're like, okay, I've seen the benefits of this. I like how I feel. I like how, my images or the picture that I'm painting for myself. Has that been helpful at all? Or do you feel like you see more of just consistent long work and individuals are able to stick to a plan more after that?
That's really thought provoking. Nobody's ever asked me that because as you were saying it, I'm thinking to myself, okay, what's the difference between a quick win and a quick fix? You know,
Yeah.
and and I do think it's helpful for people to have some quick wins and to start to feel some changes or to see themselves able to do something that's helpful and positive, and that gives them a little bit of that feeling of hopefulness and empowerment. And so like with these medications such as Ozempic that we're talking about here, what what I have seen is sometimes helpful is the way that it actually helps people connect more with their body. It kind of turns up
Mhm.
the volume on their fullness signals. And so it
Oh.
helps them to slow down and listen to their body and to honor those appetite cues. And that's such a big piece of the long-term work that I'm doing with people is like, can you
Mhm.
listen to your body and respect what it's telling you?
That's interesting. It makes me think, and I'm curious now to know, culturally, have you had to use different practices when you're helping people? And this is why I'll ask this. Some people are listening, who are listening are going to know exactly what I'm talking about. I know specifically for African American culture, we sometimes can eat as an activity. Like, "Oh, we're gonna get together, let's go out to eat." Or, "We're having a party, let's make sure we have some good food." "Are you bringing dessert? Are we gonna barbecue? What are we gonna do?" A lot of that is around, and I talked to my friend about this because now I ask myself the question, am I hungry or do I just wanna eat? Because it's now become an activity and it's fun. I love sweets, so I mean, throw that in there too. So I'm wondering, do you have to, and I'm sure it's not just African American culture, but there are other cultures who celebrate a lot around food. So culturally, do you have to take that into account when you are helping individuals with forming a new mindset around how they're going to interact with food?
Oh, 1,000,000%. And I think so
Ah,
much of that cultural competence is, it's important on many levels to understand where a person comes from and what their family and what their culture's norms and traditions are, and to not just apply our own way of thinking and being to every single person that
yeah.
we encounter. Yeah.
Oh man, that's so interesting. Now I'm
Yeah.
curious also as we kind of segue over into the parenting umbrella, how much do you work with parents for helping them to shape a positive mindset around food so they can then help their children? Are you interceding in that space at all, or is it strictly with adults?
Yeah, for sure. So, for a long time early in my private practice, I worked with adolescents and adults. Now I mostly just work with adults. I have a few teenagers that I still work with. And what is so interesting is that when I'm working with an adult who is a parent, inevitably that becomes part of our work because they
Yeah.
recognize that their relationship with food or the way that they're approaching food within their household, of course, is going to impact their kids. And a lot
Yeah.
of them are saying, like, I don't want to pass on some of this dysfunctional stuff to my children. So, how do I
Yeah.
help foster a healthy relationship towards food and towards their body in my children? And for a while, I was involved in a nonprofit organization that was here in Kansas City where we went into schools, middle schools and high schools. And our
Mhm.
goal was ultimately eating disorder prevention. But the way we were doing it was a lot of body acceptance, body positivity, teaching kids why diets don't work and trying to help prevent them from going down that path. And so that was really
Mhm.
fun to be able to work with youth in that way, to go into, their realm inside the schools and to work with groups
Yeah.
of them like that.
Oh, that is really nice, and then to help them early on just to kinda set the stage
Yeah.
for a positive foundation, I'm sure is so helpful. Um, so the I know one of the things for parenting is the kind of the clean your plate, culture that
Yep.
a lot of our parents kind of, that was their parenting realm. And no knock to them. Parents, they use the best tools that they have at the time. And at the time, that was a thing, like clean your plate, or, you eat what I make for dinner and we're not doing those alternatives. What would you say? I'll tackle the first one first. The clean your plate. What is the best way to set healthy boundaries with food with children, but also make sure that they're eating things that are healthy? Because I feel like
Yeah.
um part of the clean your plate is then like I find myself, or I did, I'm trying to be more conscious with what I'm eating, but I found myself eating even though like my cue was I'm full, but let me just go ahead. I don't want to be wasteful. Let me make sure I go ahead and clean this
Right.
off. So
Yep.
where's the healthy balance there?
Yes, it's tricky. So with kids, there's this framework called the division of responsibility, and it's
Mhm.
well researched. And basically, what it is it delineates the difference between what's the parent's job when it comes to feeding a kid and what's the kid's job. And that's going to change based on their age, and the older they get, the more responsibility falls on the child. But basically, it's the parent's job to make sure that there are consistent opportunities to eat. So, we
Okay.
as parents are in charge of making sure that there are meal times, and ideally that we're giving some structure to that and opportunities for them to sit down and eat, which is not always easy depending on when we're
Yeah.
working or what their school schedule or activity schedule is or whatever. So, this isn't going to be like an everyday thing necessarily for some families, but when possible, that there is a time for us to sit down and eat. And then we as parents are also responsible for what are we providing at a meal, and
Okay.
to provide a wide variety of food groups and nutrition, and to kind of visually show them, like, this is how you put together a meal that gives you, protein and carbohydrates and fats and some vegetables or whatever. And then the kid's responsibility is to choose from what you have offered at this meal or snack time. And they can eat as much or as little of it as they want. So the idea is that within the structure, they're listening to their body.
Okay.
And that by providing that structure, we allow them to explore and experience food, but we're not going to like cater to them outside of that or just let them snack freely all day long, because then, of course, they're not going to want to eat their dinner. So
Yeah.
it allows them to hopefully have a helpful ebb and flow between hunger and fullness. And then it gives them the chance to get in the nutrition that they need.
I gotcha. Now you mentioned letting them eat as little or as much as they want based on the meal that you provide. Is there ever a real concern like that they're not eating enough? Because I know parents will say like, "Oh, you picked your food. You didn't eat enough. I really need you to eat more." Is that
Mhm.
ever a real concern, or should we just relax and say if the child's hungry, they'll eat, and if, they didn't eat it, then they're probably okay?
Yeah, I mean, it certainly depends, and there absolutely can be times where that is a concern. I would say a lot
Mhm.
of the times, though, parents, we get worried when we don't need to be, and then
Okay.
our own anxiety and the way that we might be pressuring the kid to eat more is actually really unhelpful, and it might be causing them to kind of rebel against us. And so,
Okay.
if we're providing them enough opportunities to eat, they'll get enough to eat. And for kids, their eating is sometimes very lopsided. So
Yeah.
they might eat a whole bunch at one meal and then hardly any at another meal. And we just have to trust that over the course of, days and weeks and months, that it kind of evens itself out and they're getting what they need.
Makes sense. Okay, completely makes sense. Now, as I'm sure you've ran into before, we know that children can really like dig their heels in sometimes to certain foods. Like for a month, they're only eating chicken nuggets, or
Right.
peanut butter and jelly is the jam of the week. How is that, just as a dietitian, from your professional opinion? Is that something that we really should even address, or just leave it alone as long as they're eating, and let's just keep making the PB&J until we move to the next thing?
Oh, yeah, I totally get this. Before I became a parent, I was like, "Oh, I would never cater to my kid like that." Now I'm like, "I get it." So, if we come back to that division of responsibility, if we're
Mhm.
letting the kid pick what's for dinner every night, let's say, and they're always wanting the chicken nuggets or the PBJ, then the kid is actually over in the parent's lane, doing the parent's job of choosing what's provided. So, as a parent, we would want to provide variety at meals and to try our best to make sure that at each meal, there's something that your kid likes and that they could eat. And
Okay.
if they're on a kick with peanut butter jelly or chicken nuggets, let's work those in as meals fairly frequently. So it doesn't, but we don't want it to be every single meal. We want to rotate through some more variety so that they don't get boxed into being a super picky eater. We want
Mhm.
to expand their palate over time. So it would be like, yes, absolutely. Sometimes that's what you're serving, but sometimes not. And they're probably going to throw a fit about it and they're going to be mad. But that's how we, over time, encourage them to try other foods and to start to like other foods, because kids might need to be exposed to a food 20 times before they'll actually like it. So if the
Wow.
first time you serve something, they're like, I don't like the Brussels sprouts or, whatever it is, don't give up on that food.
Okay. Interesting. I didn't realize that. It's funny when you said the expanding their palate, it made me think, when you have your first child, like you're very just like overzealous with all these wonderful things you're going to do as
Oh,
a
yes.
parent.
Uh-huh.
And so at the time we were living in Chicago. So one of the beauties of being in a big city is you have access to all these really cool things. F who would like do this specially prepared baby food. So there's like, this is the look my mother gave me, and it was hilarious to her. And so he would do like black beans, but it's essentially just in a blender and all these different things. And I said, I want to make sure that he has an eccentric palate. And so the first delivery came and she's like, what is this? And I'm explaining it to her and she's just laughing, like, whatever. And I mean, needless to say, I eventually had to chunk it because, like every other baby, he wasn't with it. But I just really thought that this was going to be a thing and that it was really going to work. And so I thought about when you said,
Oh, yes. You have these
I gave up on that.
aspirations. Yeah.
I
And then it's
did.
that
I
funny
did.
thing
I
is,
was
like, by the
trying.
time they're toddlers, they're, like, eating, like, old chips off the floor. And
Yes,
you're like, "Why was I trying to serve
exactly.
you this, like, gourmet baby food?"
Exactly. You don't even care. You do not even care. So I know you mentioned a lot about breaking away from diet culture and being happy with your body. What would you say is probably the number one thing that someone can do to be happy with the person that they see in the mirror? Because sometimes it feels like a dangling carrot. You lose the 10 pounds
Mhm.
and you're still like, oh, one more thing, or you
Yep.
you start lifting weights and it's like one more thing. So I don't know, just from that perspective, if it's really like an actual thing that you can do or if it's more of a mind thing, but I don't work in this space. So
Mhm.
I'm curious to know your
Yeah, I
opinion.
I mean, I think for as long as it's contingent upon something changing
Uh-huh.
about our bodies, it's always gonna be that carrot dangling in front of us, and we're just gonna always be chasing that and never feeling good enough. And
Mhm.
so, the way that I work with clients is that we can work on accepting our bodies, even on the days that we don't like something about our bodies or that we wish something were different, because most of us are going to feel that way to some degree, given the world that we live in. So we don't have to be all body positive and I love everything about myself, but we can
Gotcha.
accept the way that we are genetically made and that this is the body that I have right now. And we can choose to be kind to ourselves and to our bodies, even on the days that we don't like them, because the truth is, we take better care of things that we like and accept than we do things that we hate. And so,
Yeah,
if your attitude towards yourself and your body is just that you hate it, you're ultimately not going to take good care of yourself.
that's absolutely true. That is very true. Um, so I am curious to know also because you talk about how like our relationship with food and trying to control our weight can really be more attached to emotional issues in our lives. Can you
Mhm.
talk a little bit about that dynamic of our relationship with body image and food? And do you have any recommendations or resources to help us, work those things out?
For sure, because on the surface, these things seem like it's about food or it's about our body. And if we just fixed those problems, everything would be fine.
Yeah.
But truth be told, most of the time, those are the symptoms of an underlying problem. And
Mhm.
when we start to peel back the layers, we're going to often find some stuff that's more deeply attached to our self worth or um, a sense of shame that we might have around not feeling good enough. And we've
Uh,
projected that onto being because of our body. And that if we could just
yeah.
fix our body, we've fixed our shame. Or for some people, the act of trying to control their food or dieting or trying to eat healthy, or even on the other side, like the act of eating food or like constantly seeking out food, it can become a way of avoiding our emotions or coping with our emotions or
Mhm.
soothing ourselves. And then what happens is those emotions are never directly dealt with. And
Gotcha.
so we then are like stuck in this pattern where we're continuing to use, food or dieting or binging or whatever it might be in ways that are about emotional needs and not our physical hunger. So being able to start to delineate the difference between when am I wanting to eat or when am I wanting to focus on calories or macros or controlling my food, and what else is going on emotionally if I'm not, like, physically hungry right now?
Mm, okay. That's interesting. And I feel like sometimes you have to give yourself some time just to kind of sit with what you're feeling. And sometimes I think we're always
Yeah.
going so fast that will we
Mhm.
even recognize that we're doing if we're just doing something out of habit or if there's maybe an underlying issue here sometimes, which can be kind
For
of tough.
sure. And I do have
Definitely.
a lot of people say that to me. They're like, "Katie, it's not an emotional thing, it's just a habit, and I need to break this bad habit."
Yeah.
And there may be a degree of that that's true, that's just kind of this automated response that, like, at this time of day or when I feel this way, this is my how I respond to that. But usually, if we also dig a little bit deeper, there's a reason that habit developed in the first place, or there may be some type of discomfort if you're not engaging in that behavior. And those are the emotions that we would want to get curious about.
Understandable. I'm thinking now, as you said that about the emotions and you think about the attachment with food, I know something that comes up a lot of time with parents is, as a knee jerk reaction, or you're not really sure what else to do. Like you may see your child overeating at a certain point as they get older, or, especially mine aren't teenagers, but I hear teenagers can eat. I hear they can go. And parents are like, well, wait a minute, you just had like a case of corn dogs. what is the best way to handle that? Because you don't want it to turn into now this is the soundtrack that they play when they're an adult, but,
Right?
I mean, they literally could be scaring you with the amount of food that they're
Uh-huh.
eating, so
Yeah, I know, and it's like, as a parent, like, if you're concerned about your child, like, the impulse
Yeah,
is to help or to do something about it. Yeah. So, you're exactly right that we wanna be careful in those instances to not say things like, "You can't possibly be hungry right now, we just ate," because
yeah,
inadvertently, we're sending the message that there's something wrong with you, or your hunger can't be trusted, or you can't trust yourself with food, or shame on you for wanting to eat. And
mm,
sometimes then what happens is that seed gets planted and that does become that person's inner dialogue. And with kids, if they start to feel shame about what they're eating or how much they're eating, they often will start sneaking it. And so they'll eat
mm,
when we're not looking, or they'll eat in the middle of the night, or you'll find wrappers in their room. Or if they're teenagers and they have a car, you might find evidence of it in their car. And we don't want to create that type of shame around food. And so we want to encourage them to listen to their body. We want to make sure that we're providing meals where they can sit down and, get full and satiated.
yeah,
And sometimes we have to just let them kind of figure that out on their own. And um, there may be times that they are like overeating, and that's that's a lesson that they can learn if we trust them to listen to their body.
yeah, and man, I feel bad because I have definitely been guilty of, "We just finished dinner, there's no way you're
I
hungry."
caught myself saying that to my kid the other day. I'm like, "Oh,"
Oh,
it
don't
just
feel
came
as
right out of
bad
my
now.
mouth. Yeah.
Maybe
I'm like,
I'm
"What are
okay.
you doing?"
What I have started doing is we have the fruit bowl on the table with, like, apples, bananas, and stuff like that, and so if we get to the after dinner and I'm still hungry type deal, well, I mean, at least it's an apple that you're grabbing, some type of thing that's still kind of in the healthy side of things, so snack
Yeah,
away, I
sometimes what
guess.
I'll do for my kids when I know they're kinda snacky, or, like, if dinner's gonna be kinda late, I'll cut up a little
Yeah,
snack plate. I'll put, like, maybe some apple or grapes, and then I might put, like, cheese and crackers and just, like, a
that's
little kind of like a
smart.
mini charcuterie board for them, except
I
not
love
fancy.
it.
And it's funny how, like, they will go and eat it, but they never would have made that snack for themselves.
Exactly, exactly.
Yeah.
That's so cool, I like that idea a lot. Awesome. I did wanna ask you one more thing while we're on the subject of children. If you do see I feel like this is a very delicate space. If you see your child, like, you're letting them regulate and trust their bodies, but you see that they're kind of edging over to the not so healthy, just based not necessarily on, anyone's medical record because we don't know that, but we do have BMI charts and we have other tools that can help us kinda know if we may be going in the wrong direction. If you notice that with your child, what's a safe way to approach the subject? Because you don't want to necessarily say anything about weight gain or anything to where they now have, like, this
Right.
image or
Yeah.
they think you're coming down
Mhm.
on them, but it can be a slippery slope, and you don't want your child to create a pattern as a young person that they carry out, and now they're fighting continuously through adulthood. So how do you safely approach that
It's
topic to where you're
such a
not
delicate
damaging it?
situation.
Yeah.
Yeah. It One thing that we always have to keep in the back of our minds is that kids up until like their early 20s are supposed to be gaining weight. I mean, to a degree, like, yes, there is
Okay.
such thing as like them gaining, more than they're meant to in a period of time. But we do have to keep in mind that like they should be gaining, and that's part of growth and development. And sometimes they'll gain weight and kind of like grow out before they grow up in height. And,
Okay.
we may have to allow for some of that. One statistic that's helpful is the average female between the ages of 10 and 16 gains between
Mhm.
30 and 40 pounds. So,
Wow.
and I mean, it's not a small chunk of weight gain in,
Yeah.
a relatively short period of time. So, what I always look at is the kid's growth chart. So, most doctors' offices keep a growth chart, and it's this graph that has lines on it, and then they'll put little
Yeah.
dots of where your kid is at. And I like to look at that and to say, is this kid growing according to their own personal trajectory? Like, is this how we would expect them to be growing? As a kid, I was always at like the upper end of the growth chart or even like
Mhm.
above the top line. That was my trajectory. And so we knew that I was growing normally based on my body's history.
Mhm.
Whereas my sister was one of those kids who was like at the lower end of the graph, and that was normal for her. So, what I look for with kids is, have they spiked up above their growth curve or fallen down off of it?
Okay.
Because that can sometimes indicate that something's going on with their eating
Gotcha.
where they're not eating in alignment with what their body needs.
Okay.
And so
That's a
that would be, having a conversation with the doctor would be a place to start, because the doctor's going to have the growth charts that you
yeah.
can look at, and to be able to kind of start there. And if you feel like you have the opening to start asking some questions or checking in with your child, or um, just to be curious but not judgmental,
Mhm.
um, to maybe see if you can get the pulse on how they're feeling about their body and to empathize with how hard it is to be going
Yeah.
through all these body changes, and to kind of get a gauge for where they're at without making too many assumptions right off the bat.
Gotcha.
It's hard
Completely.
though. It's hard
It is.
because,
You
of
don't wanna
course, you
say the
want to
wrong
like,
thing.
exactly. Yeah.
Yeah. Tough
Yeah.
spot for sure. Katie, I appreciate all of the wonderful information that you have been able to provide for us today. This has been a very helpful conversation for me, and I hope it's been a helpful conversation for you who are listening in the audience. How can we follow you? How can we find out, more about what you're doing and making sure that we're staying connected to your conversation?
Oh, I would love that. Yeah. I hang out quite a bit over on Instagram. My handle is at katieharvey.rd. And then you mentioned
Okay.
earlier, I have a podcast. So my podcast is called Rebuilding Trust with Your Body.
Okay. Easy enough. And as
Yeah.
usual, I will connect everything in the notes. So if you don't have a pen, just click down below and you will be able to connect with Katie and listen to her podcast and learn more about some health tips for having a positive body image, which, all of us are working on all the time. So what you're doing is definitely very much needed and appreciated. You mentioned earlier Kansas City. This is completely unrelated with anything to do with body image or diet. But as someone who's in the area, does it annoy you that now that's Taylor Swift country, so to speak? Because that's the first thing I thought about. Is that's the game Taylor
I
Swift?
know.
Is that
Right. Exactly. No, actually, I know some people are annoyed by it, but I think it's been kind of fun and like kind of
Oh,
exciting, and like,
no.
oh, like, Kansas City sort of like in the spotlight. So I think it's been
Yeah.
kind of fun and entertaining, honestly.
Yeah, well, it's been fun, as my husband's watching the game, like, I'm looking to see what's Taylor Swift doing in the box. That's what I that's the part
Exactly.
I
You're like,
wanna
that's the part I care about.
exactly, that's been a lot of fun for sure. All right, so we end every episode with the same question, and I want to ask you, what is the best advice you've ever received, or what is one piece of encouragement that you would give to someone you deeply care about?
I really like this question. Okay, I have two answers. So, one of the best pieces of advice I ever received was from my therapist. She told me that emotions are messages from our soul.
Mm,
So, I was at a period of time where I was very much like avoiding my emotions and not wanting to feel them. And once I started
yeah,
to think about them as something that's beautiful and useful, it just clicked for me. And that's always really stuck with me.
I like that.
And a piece of advice that I might give would be to worry less about our appearance in general, because when we are so focused on our weight in particular, and when we have attached so much of our value to that, that's a big piece of what messes with people's relationship with food. And they're
Yeah,
spending so much mental energy thinking about what they're eating or not eating, thinking about how they feel about themselves that day based on whether or not they gained or lost weight, or whether they like the way they look in their jeans. And we miss out on so much of life when that's constantly on our mind. So I know it's easier said than done, but to think about, what would it be like to be a little bit more accepting of yourself and compassionate towards yourself?
yeah. I love that. That's true. Good advice. Good encouragement. It reminds me, my mom would always say, we can be our own worst critics, and you look a lot better to yourself. I mean, to other people than you do to yourself. So, like, when I'm picking myself apart, like, that's my little quote that replays, like,
Yeah.
you're worried about all these things. People don't even see it. They don't even notice that this isn't
Now
the right
everybody else is
way.
too busy worrying about themselves. So, yeah.
Exactly. Exactly. So
Yeah.
that's my little, like, replay I
I
give to
love
myself
that.
when that's going on, for sure.
That's beautiful.
Well,
Yeah.
thank you. Katie, thank you so much for being here. Absolutely glad to have you. This has been an awesome conversation, and I appreciate you taking the time to stop by and chat with us.
It
Hannah's
was an
Hive.
absolute pleasure.
Wonderful. Hannah's Hive, you've been listening to the Hey Hannah podcast. If you haven't already, please give us a quick review and rating on iTunes. We absolutely appreciate it. And don't forget, you can also follow us on Facebook and Instagram as well. We'd love to connect with you on social media. We will be here again next week, same time, same place. And until next time, everybody, take care. And that's it. I'm out of here. Thank you so much for joining us on this episode of the Hey Hannah podcast. We hope that you found inspiration, insight, and encouragement in our conversation today. If you enjoyed this episode and want to stay connected with us, be sure to like, subscribe, and review the Hey Hannah podcast. Your feedback helps us reach more people and spread our message of love and wisdom. You can also follow us on social media at Hey Hannah Podcast. Find us on Facebook, Instagram, and TikTok to stay updated on all the latest episodes, behind the scenes exclusives, and engaging content. And for those of you who prefer the visual experience, catch the video versions of our podcast on our YouTube channel. Just search Hey Hannah Podcast and hit that subscribe button to never miss an episode. For even more Hey Hannah goodness, visit our website at www.heyhannahpodcast.com. There you'll find updates, bonus content, and join a community that embraces you with open arms. Your continued support truly means the world to us. Together, let's spread love, share wisdom, and honor every precious moment. Because here at Hey Hannah, we believe that life is meant to be lived well. Remember, a new episode of the Hey Hannah podcast is released every Wednesday, so mark your calendars and be sure to tune in. Thank you again for being a part of Hannah's Hive. Until next time, take care. Entertainment.